Hey guys, Korudo here again, and welcome back to another review. Now, I've been a huge fan of Sonic the Hedgehog since the early 1990s. I've played the game since the original, and I played them all the way up until about Shadow the Hedgehog, and then I came back to it after Sonic Colors. So, needless to say, I love these games. In particular, I love the Sega Genesis games, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, and in particular, Sonic 3 Knuckles. And I think that game is probably the best of the original trilogy. So Sega decided to release Sonic the Hedgehog 4 as a downloadable episodic game. And for this review, we're going to talk about Episode 2, but I think it's only fair that I talk about my thoughts on Episode 1. And for those who aren't interested, skip to this point in the video. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 takes place after Sonic 3 and Knuckles and after Sonic CD. New to the 2D Sonic formula are the air dash and the homing attack from Sonic Adventure, as well as really odd physics. Unless you hold forward, you'll lose all momentum, even in midair, which is extremely jarring. It's not that bad if you continue to hold forward, but I didn't expect the need to do so the first time I played the game. I find it extremely strange that rolling down hills in a ball isn't as fast as standard running. In a game where momentum-based platforming is critical, it really doesn't work if there's no momentum. The zones are Splash Hill Zone, Casino Street Zone, Lost Labyrinth Zone, Mad Gear Zone, and the Egg Station. Each has its own gimmick, such as Casino Street Zone Act 2, one with its roads of cards, Lost Labyrinth Zone Act 2, with lighting torches. Other than that, the game doesn't really do anything original. In fact, this game rehashes far too many things from Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 for my liking. There's no new power-ups, no original stage designs, not even one original boss. Don't get me wrong, it's an enjoyable game, really, but it's just not worth the price tag. If you've never played the original Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic 2, then by all means, play Sonic 4 Episode 1. You'll have fun. However, with only 4 zones and 1 final zone, I can't justify the game for the price tag. If you have played the original games, then I'd suggest you either buy this game on a sale or pass altogether. You can make up your own minds whether or not you want to buy Episode 1. It's really up to you. So here we are at the main event. Let's take a much more in-depth look at Sega's next entry into the Sonic 4 series, Sonic the Hedgehog 4, Episode 2. The story for this game. Dr. Robotnik is trying to take over the world yet again. He's recovered Metal Sonic from Little Planet, which has made its annual return. In other words, Sonic CD took place 1 year prior, apparently. Sonic and Tails join up again to stop him. That's pretty much it. No super monsters, no gimmicks, just straight up stop the Mad Doctor. Works for me. Gameplay is, in general, similar to Episode 1 and its Sega Genesis Mega Drive counterparts. Sonic 4 Episode 2 is a 2D side-scrolling, momentum-based platforming game with an emphasis on speed. Run and jump your way to the right as fast as possible to rush past the goalpost. Throughout the levels, there are item monitors which contain 1-ups, shields to give you 1 extra hit, speed shoes to run twice as fast, and invincibility to guide your way through the level for a limited time. Along the way you gather golden rings by running into them. You can collect as many as you want, but if you get hit even once, you'll lose them all. These rings serve as a single hit point in a sense. There's no health bar in this game. As long as you have at least 1 ring, you can survive. If you get hit and you have 0 rings, you die. It sounds unforgiving, but it's really not that bad, because you can recover rings you drop within a limited time. If you have 32 rings or more, you can recover up to 32 rings, which is nice compared to the 20 rings from the original Genesis games. 31 and less, and you can recover those amounts. Just be mindful that the more frequently you drop the same rings, the harder it will be to recover them. They'll disappear faster. If you have 50 rings or more when you reach the end of an act, you can jump into the gold ring to enter the special stage, of which we'll get into later. Levels are divided into zones and acts. Zones being the overall theme, and acts being the particular stages. We have Sylvania Castle Zone, which has water and stone pillar gimmicks, White Park Zone, which has snow and roller coaster elements, Oil Desert Zone, which utilizes oil slicks and sandstorms, Sky Fortress Zone, which is all about avoiding falling to your death, and Death Egg Zone Mark II, which is all about gravity changes. Excluding Death Egg Mark II, this game only really has 4 complete zones. For the downloadable title, I guess it works, but as a standalone game, it's really short. It's about as small as Sonic 3, if not shorter. However, while there may be fewer zones, there are more acts in this game than even the original Sonic the Hedgehog. Each zone has 3 acts, followed by a dedicated boss act. The level structure is more similar to Sonic 2's than Sonic 3's. There are no mini-bosses, just the boss and the boss acts. The bosses generally take 8 hits to take down, and are pretty decent. They also change into kind of a desperate attack mode when they have 1 more hit to go, and that's pretty interesting. So let's get into the controls. For the purposes of the review, I'm going to explain the PlayStation 3's controller layout, because that's the version I have. I'm assuming the other versions are much different. Use the D-pad or left analog stick, press the X button to jump. While running, you can hold down to curl into a ball and destroy enemies and destructible walls. Hold down and repeatedly tap X to rev up your spin dash, and release the down button to quickly spin as a ball. It's an effective way to gain speed. This is about where the similarities to the Genesis game's controls end. Jump in midair to do an air dash. This gives you a bit of forward propulsion. Doing this several times is probably the quickest way to gain speed while running. Lock-on reticules appear on enemies if you're in the air. Air dashing near them activates the homing attack, which propels you into them. This is a pretty convenient attack method, and it is often necessary to reach the higher paths. This is definitely a mechanic I'd like. While it's a departure from the classic games, Sonic Adventure Onward is close enough. Square button activates the tag actions, which changes depending on your situation. If you're in the air, you activate the copter combo. Tails can lift Sonic higher up to 7 times until he gets tired. After the 7th time, he'll just drop like a rock. During rolling combo, Sonic and Tails, yeah. They do the totally appropriate, not suggestive at all, double spin dash attack to roll faster, destroy certain walls, and are invincible while doing so. No, really, you can use the rolling combo on spikes and take no damage. And submarine combo in the water. Submarine combo is my favorite combination and the biggest improvement in terms of gameplay for Sonic 4 Episode 2. While underwater, repeatedly tap the jump button to spin Tails, like a propeller. Unlike copter combo, you can do this indefinitely. As long as Sonic has air, of course. This really does speed up the underwater sections, and if you really loathe underwater sections in Sonic games, this might be a godsend for you. And to me, it makes the game a lot more fluid. That pretty much sums up the main game. Let's go over the replay value. Collecting 50 rings or more in an act summons a special stage at the end of an act, which you jump into like Sonic 1, Sonic CD, and Episode 1. Don't try to repeat the same acts for Chaos Emeralds though. You can only get 1 Chaos Emerald per act. The game. It knows. Avoid the bombs, which take away 10 rings per hit, and electric traps, which slow you down. Hold the square button to boost. The stages are very similar in design to Sonic 2's, except a little easier. Except for Special Stage 7! Thankfully, you can infinitely retry if you're about to fail. If you meet all of the quotas for all of the gates, you collect the Chaos Emerald, which really doesn't do anything individually. However, collect all 7 to unlock Supersonic mode. Activate Supersonic by collecting 50 rings or more in an act and press triangle. Yes, they have a dedicated button to activate Supersonic, unlike the Genesis games. Sonic 2 forced you to transform after a single jump, and Sonic 3 Knuckles after a double jump. Then you can Super God your way through the levels with invincibility, double speed, double damage, double height. Yeah, it's great being Super God, but of course there's a catch. The catch is, your ring count goes down by 1 every second, so if you want to keep Supersonic active indefinitely, you have to keep collecting rings. It's a great reward for collecting all those Chaos Emeralds, and sometimes it's just fun to give all your enemies and hazards the finger. Except for crushing and bottomless pits, of course. Those still kill you. Here's something interesting though. If you activate a tag combo, it forces you out of Supersonic mode. This is good and bad. If you want to conserve your rings, you can cancel Super God. However, if you wanted to keep Supersonic, your partner calls you when you have 49 rings or less, you can't reactivate it unless you find more rings. Overall, I'd say Supersonic is much more balanced in this game in terms of activation than its Sega Genesis counterparts. Everything I've described up until now can be classified as score attack mode. From the map screen, you can upload your scores to online leaderboards for any act in any game that you've previously completed. There's also a time attack mode. Like Score Attack, you can upload the scores to your internet leaderboards. This is fun to do from time to time, since you can choose any act of any zone whenever you want. So that's pretty much it for the main single-player game for Sonic 4 Episode 2. Now let's talk about the 2-player co-op. For the first time since Sonic 3, we have multiplayer in a 2D console Sonic game. It's probably the most interesting new mechanic. This game offers a traditional 2D Sonic game with local and online cooperative play. Unlike single player, one person can play as Tails. He controls a lot like he does in Sonic 3. He can run, jump, and spin dash, as well as he can fly as high as he wants and as far as he wants, but for a limited time. Unlike Sonic, he cannot do the air dash or homing attack. He feels different enough. I find it interesting that his flying mechanics are different than when using Copter Combo. By pressing R2, a player can call the other player to them, whether they like it or not. This is definitely a troll-worthy button if used douchebaggingly. Like most platformers with co-op, yeah, I'd say this game is meant for single player first. I just think that the co-op in this game helps this entry stand out from the others. Years down the line, I'll think, I want to play a 2D Sonic game, but one with decent co-op. I think I'll play Sonic 4 Episode 2. It's the reason to come back to this game. This game does not surpass the original trilogy by any means, but at the very least it has something to call its own. The multiplayer, for the most part, is enjoyable. It's fun teaming up with either people on the couch or random people online and using tag actions to get through the levels. Though it's still pretty much just follow the leader like Sonic 2 and 3. If the lead character goes too far ahead, the other player's character gets yanked from oblivion to the leader's side. I guess this is to keep the fast pace of the game going. That about does it for the multiplayer. Alright, let's go over the pros. I really appreciate the fact this game has unique gameplay. I feel like the Sonic-Tails combo gives this game its identity, and it's a welcome one. The tag actions are useful and are fun most of the time. I'm also glad that Tails plays similar to Sonic in multiplayer, but different enough to justify a second person playing as him. Tails can fly, Sonic can air dash and use the homing attack. It's pretty good to play as either. The gameplay is fast and fluid like most other 2D Sonic games, and there's no out-of-place gimmick. Very good. I really enjoyed a lot of the level designs. There are a lot of multiple paths to take with some of the zones, and it's enjoyable to see what else this game has to offer. Sylvania Castle Zone Act 1 has a ton of different ways to reach the goalpost. I discovered this one trying to get to the end in under a minute. The faster you want to go, the higher path you need to take. I also enjoyed White Park Act 1's gimmicks. Rolling combo through a snow cavern was pretty awesome. And Sky Fortress Acts 2 and 3 just have amazing level design. Period. It's speedrunning with variety. Reward me for playing well and encourage me to try out different routes. That's why I play Sonic the Hedgehog games. I really liked how the boss fights alternate between Dr. Robotnik and Metal Sonic. Each boss felt unique and interesting for the most part. Thankfully, none of the bosses are rehashes. The White Park boss is actually one of the most fun Metal Sonic fights in Sonic history, 2D or otherwise, in my opinion. But most of all, I am really glad they changed the physics from Episode 1. I know it may not sound like much, but it really does make a difference. The faster you go, the more noticeable stuff like this is. It's still not quite as good as the original trilogies, but hey, it's good enough for me, especially considering that the lead programmer is no longer part of the team. Waiting for Sega to make the new physics engine really was worth it, and this game is much more fun because of it. I can focus more on timing my jumps and on the next move rather than getting annoyed at when I drop like a rock whenever I let go of the D-pad. Now, let's talk about the cons. I'll go over them from least to most annoying. Keep in mind that most of these are just nitpicks. In this game, you can collect red star rings. For those who don't know, red star rings were introduced in Sonic Colors. Collecting all of them allowed you to play in the levels. In Sonic Generations, they unlocked concept art, and more importantly, soundtracks from previous Sonic games that could be played in the levels, replacing the regular stage music. Pretty awesome, right? While I wasn't expecting anything like that for Sonic 4 Episode 2, I was expecting something besides this. Really, Sega? A trophy? That's just like promising a prize to someone who won a race. You walk up to the winner and they're expecting some kind of prize, and you just give them a slip of paper that says, "You did it!" It's just underwhelming. While this game is co-op based, I still stand by my previous statement. This game is designed for single player. Sometimes 2 players isn't really the best idea. Like Sky Fortress Act 1. In the single player, Sonic can run and jump wherever he wants, and the plane is always under him. In co-op, the second player controls the plane. If there's no communication, or just an accident, the Tails player can easily fail to catch Sonic. Or the Tails player can choose to be Lord Douche Baggington III, and purposefully dodge Sonic as he tries to land. I understand that co-op can always have these kind of moments, but the stakes are way too high here, especially considering you share lives. And you have to start over from the checkpoint if Sonic dies. Speaking of co-op shenanigans, it's annoying that if Tails gets hit while carrying Sonic during Copter Combo, he drops Sonic. But Korudo, that's how the game works! Maybe, but don't do that over an extended bottomless pit with fire enemies. That part was tricky enough to get past in single player, let alone with an online random person. This is a nitpick, but it kind of annoys me how the tutorial monitors are everywhere. How did this decision come to be? Were the developers like, well, gamers today are too stupid to figure things out. Let's tell them what to do in particular areas, especially the obvious ones. No thanks, Sega. I don't think I need a prompt to use the copter combo in a vertical path where the only way to go is up. Thanks. Probably the most glaring con I could think of this game is how the bosses are handled. They're way too cinematic. It just surprises me considering how fast the rest of the game is by comparison. Look here, I activate Supersonic mode as soon as the boss starts. I start with 50 rings, and I have 33 rings by the time I can attack. That's 17 seconds. It may not sound like much, but 17 seconds is a long time in a Sonic game. And this is completely unskippable, no matter how many times I play this game. It just breaks the pacing way too much to my liking. Adding to the tedium is the boss music. Now, I like it, but it loops way too soon. This is actually the Desperate Attack mode music from episode 1, but it plays the entire time. Can you imagine if they did that with Sonic 2? Now, despite these complaints, this is still a great game. I just feel like there were some odd choices on Sega's part. None of them really take away from the game experience that much. It's still a lot of fun to play, but these are just some flaws that I noticed. Before we wrap this up, we have one last piece of unfinished business, the lock-on content of this game. For those who did purchase Episode 1, you're treated to Episode Metal. This is kinda cool because you can play 4 acts as Metal Sonic, which tells the story of what happened to him between Sonic CD and Sonic 4 Episode 2. You play as Metal Sonic through reverse order of what Sonic did in Episode 1. Mad Gear Zone, Lost Labyrinth Zone, Casino Street Zone, and Splash Hill Zone. Each of these zones are only 1 act long and have no bosses. I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I'm thrilled Episode Metal is being offered free to people who own both Episode 1 and 2. It's also kinda cool that you can go through 4 reworked Episode 1 levels with Episode 2 physics. On the other hand, I feel like this is a big missed opportunity. Metal Sonic plays exactly like Sonic in Episode 2, minus Tails. When you face him as a boss, he has so many other abilities. At least give him the maximum overdrive mode. It's even less excusable when he obtains that ancient power source from Lost Labyrinth in Act 2. Yet, if Metal Sonic was extremely different than Sonic, people who only bought Episode 2 would complain about it, saying Sega is playing favorites. Episode Metal is a nice addition if you bought Episode 2 and you already have Episode 1, but by no means purchase Episode 1 just for Episode Metal. It's not nearly worth it. Sega talked about Episode Metal as being Sonic 4's lock-on content, kind of like how Sonic & Knuckles had lock-on content for Sonic 3 and Sonic 2. Well, in that case, why couldn't we just play as Sonic and Tails in Episode 1? I think that would have been kinda cool. As for Episode Metal and Metal Sonic himself, I personally think it would have been better if they just expanded upon it a little bit more, given him more abilities, or at least give him something to make him different than Sonic. That's just my take on it anyway. Overall, I'd say Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 is a good game, but it does not surpass the original trilogy by any means. And you gotta look at it like this. You have Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, Mario Bros. 3, and then what if they had called New Super Mario Bros. Wii Super Mario Bros. 4? People would have had huge expectations of that game, and they probably would have not lived up to the hype. And the thing is, I feel like that's what Sega should have done. They should have not called this series Sonic 4. But they did, and that's just how it is. So, if you think of it as a brand new Sonic the Hedgehog game in HD, you'll enjoy it, I guarantee it. This game has something new to offer in the tag actions and cooperative gameplay. And I think if you enjoy the original Genesis games at all, you really should try this game out. At least play the demo. And I personally think it is worth $15. And I thoroughly enjoy it. I often come back and play it just for fun, which is a lot more than I can say for Episode 1. Anyway, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this and found it informative. Until next time, guys, take care.
Mr. Robotnik!
Nobody calls me that anymore.
I do.